Hey everyone, and welcome back. There's something inherently unsettling about gas stations, isn't there? Especially late at night. Those fluorescent lights humming over empty asphalt, the lonely attendant behind bulletproof glass, the vast darkness pressing in from just beyond the pumps. They're liminal spaces, places of brief transition, stopovers on long journeys through the unknown. But sometimes these places become stages for encounters far more terrifying than just running low on fuel. Tonight we're peering into that unsettling glow, exploring 5 disturbing true accounts of horror that unfolded under the watchful eyes of gas station signs. These stories come from people who stopped for gas, a quick snack, or just a moment's rest, only to find themselves trapped in a nightmare. So lock your doors, check your mirrors and settle in, because these tales from the pump might make you think twice about your next late night stop. My buddy Kevin and I were driving back from a concert upstate, somewhere deep in rural Pennsylvania. It was late, probably pushing 2 a.m., and we were on one of those winding 2-lane highways where towns are few and far between. The kind of road where the trees crowd right up to the shoulder and the darkness feels absolute. Kevin's ancient pickup truck, bless its rusty heart, had a gas gauge that was more suggestion than science, and it had been hovering near empty for the last hour. My own anxiety had been steadily climbing with each mile marker we passed without seeing any sign of civilization. Finally, like a beacon in the oppressive dark, we saw the familiar glow of a gas station sign ahead. It was a small independent place, the kind with maybe 4 pumps and a tiny convenience store attached, sitting all by itself on a lonely stretch of road. Relief washed over me as Kevin pulled in. Only one flickering fluorescent tube illuminated the pumps, casting long, dancing shadows. The store itself was dark, save for a dim light somewhere in the back. "Looks closed," Kevin muttered, shutting off the engine. The sudden silence was almost deafening, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of what might have been the station's coolers. "Maybe they have pay at the pump," I suggested, peering towards the machines. Kevin got out and tried his card. Declined. He tried another. Declined again. Damn it. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Cash only, maybe, but the store looks locked up tight. We were low on cash, having spent most of it at the concert. We probably had maybe $10 between us. "Let me check the door," I said, hopping out. The air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of pine needles and wet earth. As I walked towards the small building, I got this weird feeling, like being watched. I scanned the area. The empty pumps, Kevin leaning against his truck, the dark windows of the store, and beyond that, the thick wall of trees that bordered the property on 3 sides. Nothing seemed out of place, but the feeling persisted, prickling the back of my neck. The door was locked, just as we suspected. A small handwritten sign taped to the glass read, "Night Window." An arrow pointed towards a small, thick-glassed window set into the wall, the kind you see at old banks or check-cashing places. There was a metal drawer underneath it for transactions. A dim yellow light emanated from inside, suggesting someone was there, just hidden from view. I walked over and tapped lightly on the glass. No response. I tapped again, a little harder. Still nothing. I leaned closer, trying to peer through the thick, slightly grimy pane. I couldn't see much, just vague shapes in the dimly lit space beyond. "Hello? Anyone working?" Silence. Then a faint shuffling sound from inside. My heart gave a little jump. Finally, a shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom within and moved towards the window, but it didn't look like a person getting ready to help a customer. The movement was slow, almost hesitant, and the figure stayed just out of clear view. We need gas. Card reader isn't working. Can we pay cash? More silence. The figure didn't move closer, didn't speak. The feeling of being watched intensified, but now it felt like it wasn't just coming from the woods anymore, but from inside the booth, too. It was deeply unsettling. Everything okay? I don't know. Someone's in there, but they're not responding. Hey, we need some gas. Suddenly, a low chuckle emanated from the speaker embedded near the window. It wasn't a friendly sound. It was raspy, dry, and filled with something that sounded unnervingly like amusement. Gas, huh? Middle of the night, long way from anywhere. Yeah, gauge is on E. Can you turn on pump 3 for $10? $10 ain't gonna get you far. Might not even get you out of sight of this place. It's all we got. I chimed in, feeling a growing sense of dread. Something was very wrong here. This wasn't just an unhelpful attendant. Maybe you got something else I might want. Kevin and I exchanged a look. Alarm bells were screaming in my head now. Look, man, we just need gas. Maybe I turn the pump on, maybe I don't. Depends. Depends on what? My blood ran cold. I slowly turned my head almost against my will towards the dense woods bordering the station lot. The darkness seemed deeper now, more menacing. The tree line was maybe 50 yards away. Was that a flicker of movement, a shape detaching itself from the shadows? My eyes strained, trying to pierce the gloom. What are you talking about? He watches, likes to watch folks who stop here late. Sometimes he comes closer. I definitely saw something then, or thought I did. A pale shape, low to the ground, moving between the thick tree trunks. Was it an animal, a deer, or was it someone crouching? My breath hitched. Is someone out there? Always someone out there. This is his place. He don't like folks stopping too long. Especially folks who ask too many questions. A twig snapped loudly from the direction of the woods. Both Kevin and I jumped, whirling around. This time I was sure. There was a figure standing just at the edge of the tree line, partially obscured by branches. Tall, unnaturally still. It looked like a man, but the proportions seemed slightly off in the dim, flickering light. He was just standing there watching us. Jesus Christ. He don't like being seen, gets agitated. Turn on the pump! Just give us the damn gas! Maybe you should just go. Forget the gas. Just drive. Might be safer. Safer? Or was this part of some twisted game? Was the attendant working with whoever or whatever was out there? Were they trying to lure us away from the relative light of the station into the dark road, or genuinely warning us? My mind raced, paranoia gripping me tight. The figure in the woods took a step forward out from behind the tree. It was definitely a man, dressed in dark, ragged clothing. His face was obscured by shadow and distance, but the way he moved, slow, deliberate, yet somehow predatory, sent shivers down my spine. He took another step. We're leaving. Come on. We scrambled back towards the truck, fumbling with the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the handle. I kept glancing back towards the woods. The man was still there, closer now, maybe 40 yards away, and he wasn't alone. I saw another flicker of movement behind him, then another. It was hard to be sure in the poor light, but it looked like there were more figures emerging from the trees, silent and watchful. As Kevin jammed the key into the ignition, the truck roaring to life felt like the loudest sound in the world. He slammed it into reverse, tires squealing on the pavement as he backed out aggressively. My eyes were glued to the woods. The figures hadn't moved closer, but they were all facing us now, dark silhouettes against the even darker forest. Then I looked back at the attendant's booth. The dim light inside was still on, but the window was empty. The shadow was gone. Had he slipped out the back? Was he joining the others? Kevin didn't wait to find out. He spun the truck around and floored it, peeling out of the gas station lot and back onto the highway, heading away as fast as the old engine could manage. We didn't speak for miles. The only sound, the roar of the engine and our own ragged breathing. My heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. What the hell was that? I have no idea. The guy in the booth, the people in the woods. Were they together? Was it some kind of setup? Felt like it, or maybe the guy in the booth was just as scared as we were, trying to warn us off. Warning us, or messing with us, telling us someone was watching, making us look. Making us easy targets, distracted. We drove for another hour, adrenaline keeping us wide awake, constantly checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights gaining on us or worse, figures emerging from the roadside darkness. We finally found another gas station, this one brightly lit, part of a larger truck stop complex buzzing with activity even at that hour. We filled the tank, hands still shaking, slightly bought coffee and just sat in the truck for a while. The noise and light a welcome shield against the memory of the silent watchers in the woods and the whispering voice from the booth. We never found out what was really going on at that isolated gas station. Was it a prank, a local legend the attendant used to scare people? Or were we genuinely in danger? Was there really a man or men who haunted those woods, preying on late-night travelers, perhaps with the complicity of the person locked away in that dim booth? The ambiguity is almost worse than knowing. That feeling of being watched, the cryptic warnings, the silent figures emerging from the darkness, it stayed with me. Every time I pull into a gas station late at night, especially one that feels a little too quiet, a little too isolated, I feel that same prickle of unease on the back of my neck. I check the woods. I glance nervously at the attendant's window, and I never ever let the tank get close to empty on a dark, lonely road. Time code 0001550000000200000. This happened to me about 10 years ago. I was working as a long-haul trucker, crisscrossing the country, mostly running routes through the Midwest and the South. You get used to the isolation, the long stretches of highway, the weird hours. You also get used to gas stations and truck stops at all hours of the night. They become familiar territory, predictable pit stops. Until one night in the absolute middle of nowhere, somewhere along Interstate 40 in western Oklahoma, or maybe the Texas Panhandle, the landscape out there gets pretty featureless, especially after midnight. I needed fuel, obviously, and I saw signs for a 24-hour truck stop coming up. It wasn't one of the big chains, just an independent place called something generic like Road Ranger or Traveler's Oasis. I forget the exact name. It looked a little run down, even from the highway exit ramp. Dim lighting, cracked pavement in the lot, weeds growing up around the diesel pumps. But it was the only option for miles, and my tanks were getting low. I pulled my rig around back to the diesel islands. There were maybe 2 or 3 other trucks parked over in the long-term spots, engines idling softly, curtains drawn. But the fuel islands themselves were deserted. It was dead quiet, except for the hum of my own engine and the distant drone of highway traffic. The air was heavy and still, that kind of pre-dawn calm that can feel either peaceful or deeply eerie. Tonight it felt eerie. The convenience store part of the truck stop looked open, lights on inside, but I couldn't see anyone moving around. I figured the attendant was probably in the back or cleaning. I swiped my company fuel card, punched in my info, and started the pump. Diesel pumps are slow, so I had a good 10 or 15 minutes to kill. Usually I'd go inside, grab a coffee, use the restroom, but something about the place felt off. The silence, the isolation, the slightly dilapidated look of everything, I decided to just stay by my truck. I leaned against the cool metal of my rig, watching the numbers on the pump slowly climb, scanning the surroundings. The truck stop backed up against a wide, flat expanse of dark prairie. No trees, no hills, just flat, empty land stretching out to a horizon I couldn't even see in the darkness. The only light came from the weak orange glow of the sodium lamps around the lot and the brighter fluorescence from the store. That's when I saw him. He wasn't there 1 second, and the next he was just standing there, near the edge of the light where the paved lot met the dark field. He was maybe 30 yards away from me. My first thought was that he was another trucker, maybe stretching his legs or taking a leak. But he was dressed strangely. He wore what looked like old-fashioned clothes, dark trousers, a button-up shirt that seemed too formal for a truck stop, and most unnervingly, a wide-brimmed pale hat, almost like something a cowboy would wear, but it looked too clean, too white against the gloom. What really got me, though, was his stillness. He wasn't moving a muscle, just standing there, facing my direction, head slightly tilted as if listening. His face was obscured by the brim of the hat in the distance, but I got the distinct impression he was looking right at me. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the night air. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was waiting for a ride, maybe his car broke down. But why stand out there in the dark, so still? Why not come into the light, go into the store? I kept glancing between the pump and the figure. He didn't move. It was like looking at a statue, except I knew it wasn't. The diesel pump clicked off, signaling it was done. The sound was jarringly loud in the silence. I pulled the nozzle out, replaced the cap on my tank, and hung the nozzle back up. All the while I kept the man in my peripheral vision. He still hadn't moved. Not an inch. Okay, time to go. I got the receipt from the pump, folded it, and started walking towards my cab. I deliberately didn't look directly at the man. I just wanted to get in my truck, lock the doors, and get the hell out of there. My footsteps crunched on the gravel scattered over the pavement. As I reached for the handle of my cab door, I risked a quick glance back. My blood turned to ice. He was closer. Significantly closer, maybe only 15 yards away now. And he was still standing in that same unnatural frozen pose, head tilted, facing me. How had he moved so quickly and silently? I hadn't heard a thing. The ground was uneven, scattered with loose stones. There's no way he could have covered that distance without making some noise. Panic started to set in. I fumbled with the door handle, pulled myself up into the cab, and slammed the door shut, immediately hitting the lock button. My heart was pounding against my ribs. I looked out the passenger side window. He was still there, a pale, still figure under the sickly orange light. The wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face completely, giving him a terrifyingly anonymous look. I fired up the engine, the roar feeling like a protective shield. I put the truck in gear, checked my mirror's empty road behind me, just the other parked trucks, and started to pull away from the fuel island. As I rolled forward, I had to pass the spot where he was standing. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead, gripping the steering wheel tightly, but I could feel his presence just outside my window. I couldn't resist one last look in my side mirror as I turned towards the exit ramp. He was still standing there, exactly where he'd been. But as my truck's headlights swept across him, illuminating him fully for just a second, I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it. Beneath the brim of the pale hat where his face should have been, there was nothing. Just smooth, undifferentiated shadow. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a blank, featureless void. I stomped on the accelerator, getting my rig back onto the interstate as fast as I could. I didn't slow down for miles, pushing the engine harder than I probably should have. Every shadow on the side of the road looked like a waiting figure. Every glint of light seemed like the brim of a pale hat. I drove straight through until dawn, skipping my next planned break. When the sun finally started to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, some of the terror began to fade, replaced by a deep exhaustion and a lingering bone-deep chill. I've told a few other truckers this story over the years. Most just nod, maybe share their own weird tale of the road. But one old-timer, a guy who'd been driving those routes since the 70s, got real quiet when I mentioned the pale hat and the blank face. He told me there were old stories about that stretch of highway, about a figure sometimes seen at lonely crossroads or isolated stops late at night. Some called him a ghost, some a demon, some just the Pale Rider. A watcher, an omen. He said the wise thing to do if you saw him was exactly what I did. Don't engage, don't stare, just leave. I never stopped at that truck stop again, even though my routes took me past it dozens of times over the next few years. Every time I passed the exit, especially at night, I'd feel that same cold dread creep up my spine. I'd grip the wheel tighter, check my mirrors compulsively, and keep my eyes firmly on the road ahead, praying I wouldn't see a lone figure in a pale hat standing silently at the edge of the light, waiting. That image, the featureless void under the hat brim, is burned into my memory. It's a reminder that sometimes the loneliest stretches of road hold more than just emptiness. Sometimes they hold watchers from the dark. The rest stop radio. My sister Chloe and I were driving cross-country, moving her from California to Illinois after she finished grad school. We were young, in our early 20s, and trying to do it on the cheap, which meant driving her packed to the gills hatchback ourselves, taking turns behind the wheel, and subsisting mostly on gas station snacks and terrible coffee. We were somewhere in Nevada, deep in the desert, probably around day 2 of the trip. It was the middle of the afternoon, blisteringly hot, the kind of heat that radiates off the asphalt in visible waves. The air conditioning in her car was struggling, and we were both feeling tired and sticky. We saw a sign for a rest stop and gas station combo, one of those isolated ones plopped down in the middle of absolutely nowhere, miles from the nearest town. It looked like a welcome oasis. Chloe, thank God. I need to stretch my legs, and maybe they have ice cream. The place was eerily quiet. There were maybe 2 other cars in the parking lot, but no people in sight. The gas station part looked small and basic, attached to a slightly larger building that presumably housed the restrooms and maybe a small convenience store. The architecture had that slightly dated, sun-bleached look, common to desert outposts. The silence was heavy, broken only by the buzz of insects and the distant shimmering sound of the heat itself. We parked and got out, the heat hitting us like a physical blow. Okay, you grab snacks, I'll hit the restroom. Chloe nodded, heading towards the convenience store entrance. I walked towards the separate restroom building. It stood a little apart from the main structure, connected by a covered walkway. As I got closer, I noticed something odd. Faint music was playing, seemingly coming from inside the women's restroom. It sounded like old-timey radio music, maybe big band or swing from the 40s or 50s. It was tinny and slightly distorted, like it was coming from a cheap speaker. Strange choice for a public restroom, I thought, but shrugged it off. Maybe the attendant liked vintage tunes. I pushed open the heavy door. The music was definitely louder inside, echoing slightly off the tiled walls. The restroom itself was empty, thankfully clean, but dimly lit. There were 3 stalls and a row of sinks. The music seemed to be coming from a small, old, portable radio sitting on the back of one of the toilets in the furthest stall. It was a beat-up looking thing. Cream-colored plastic, yellowed with age, with a bent antenna. It wasn't plugged in. It must have been running on batteries. Who leaves a radio playing in a public restroom stall? It struck me as weird, maybe a little careless. I used one of the other stalls, the jaunty, slightly staticky music filling the silence. It It was actually kind of creepy listening to this cheerful old music in a deserted, slightly dim rest-stop bathroom in the middle of the desert. It felt out of place, discordant. As I was washing my hands, the music suddenly stopped. Mid-song, just cut out. The silence that rushed back in felt heavy, almost suffocating. Then, static crackled from the radio, harsh and loud, making me jump. It lasted for maybe 5 seconds, then stopped. Silence again. Okay, that was officially weird. Maybe the batteries died, or the station went off air, but the static burst was unsettling. I dried my hands quickly, suddenly eager to get out of there. As I reached for the door, the radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't static and it wasn't music, it was a voice. A low guttural whisper distorted by the cheap speaker, but clear enough to understand. Voice, OS, get out. I froze, hand hovering over the door handle. My heart leaped into my throat. Did I hear that right? It couldn't be. Maybe it was interference, crosstalk from another frequency. Voice, OS, get out, now. That was enough for me. I yanked the door open and practically ran out, back into the blinding sunlight and oppressive heat. My breath was coming in short gasps. I looked around wildly. Still no one in sight. The other cars were still parked, silent under the sun. I hurried towards the convenience store, my mind racing. Was someone hiding in the stall with the radio? Had they whispered into a walkie-talkie on the same frequency? Was it some kind of sick prank, or was it something else? The voice had sounded old and angry. I burst into the convenience store, the bell above the door jingling loudly. Chloe was at the counter, paying for drinks and chips. An elderly woman with severely permed white hair and thick glasses stood behind the register, looking bored. The store was cool and smelled faintly of cleaning products and stale coffee. "Are you okay?" Chloe asked, seeing the look on my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something weird just happened in the restroom," I stammered, trying to catch my breath. I quickly explained about the radio, the music cutting out, the static, and then the whispering voice telling me to get out. Chloe frowned, exchanging a glance with the cashier. The old woman's bored expression didn't change. "Cashier? A radio? There ain't no radio in the ladies' room, honey. Haven't been one in years. Wiring's shot in that building, barely keep the lights on, let alone power a radio." "It wasn't plugged in," I insisted. "It was an old portable one, sitting on the back of the toilet in the last stall. Cream-colored." "Cream-colored? Kinda beat up? With a bent antenna?" "Yes, that's the one," I said, relieved she seemed to recognize it. "Honey," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "that radio belonged to Millie. She used to work here years ago. Loved her old music. She died in that restroom. Heart attack, right there in the last stall, listening to her radio." "She died there?" "Years ago," the cashier repeated, avoiding my eyes now, fiddling with the register keys. "Folks say sometimes they still hear her music, or hear things, whispers. Mostly tells them to leave. Millie was always protective of her space." "Okay, let's go," she said, her voice tight. She practically dragged me out of the store, leaving our paid-for snacks on the counter. We jumped back into the hatchback, the interior feeling like an oven. Chloe fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking slightly. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "She died in there." "I know," I breathed, glancing back at the innocuous-looking restroom building. It looked different now, imbued with a sinister quality. The silence of the place no longer felt peaceful, but charged with unseen presence. As Chloe started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, tires crunching on the gravel, I looked back one last time. There was no one visible. Just the shimmering heat, the silent gas pumps, the lonely store, and the restroom building standing slightly apart. But as we accelerated back onto the highway, I could have sworn I heard, very faintly, carried on the hot desert wind, the tinny strains of old-timey music starting up again. We didn't talk much for the next hour. The cheerful landscape outside seemed menacing. The vast emptiness of the desert felt isolating rather than freeing. The encounter had shaken us both badly. The thought of that voice, low and guttural, whispering from a dead woman's radio in the exact spot where she died. It was terrifying on a primal level. Was it a ghost, a residual haunting, or just a bizarre coincidence coupled with an overactive imagination fueled by heat and fatigue? The cashier's reaction sealed it for me, though. She knew the radio. She knew the story. She wasn't surprised, just scared. Whatever haunts that lonely Nevada rest stop, it's real enough to have a reputation. And it apparently doesn't like visitors lingering too long in Millie's final resting place. We made sure to use facilities in busy, well-lit towns for the rest of the trip. The smiling attendant. This one still gives me the creeps just thinking about it. It happened when I was driving back to college after visiting my parents for a weekend. I was taking Interstate 80 across Nebraska, a notoriously flat and monotonous stretch of highway. It was late, probably around 1 a.m., and I was fighting to stay awake. The hypnotic drone of the road and the darkness outside the bubble of my headlights were starting to win. I knew I needed caffeine badly. I saw a sign for gas and coffee at the next exit. It wasn't a major truck stop, just a small standalone gas station advertising 24-hour service. Perfect. I pulled off the interstate and followed the short road to the station. It was brightly lit, surprisingly so for its size, bathing the pumps and the small convenience store in a stark, almost unnatural white light. There were no other cars there, just my little sedan under the humming fluorescent glow. I parked near the entrance to the store and went inside. The interior was just as bright as the outside, almost painfully so. Everything was clean, meticulously organized, shelves perfectly stocked. Behind the counter stood the attendant. He was a young guy, maybe early 20s like me, with sandy blonde hair and a clean-shaven face. And he was smiling. Not just a polite customer service smile, but a huge, wide, toothy grin that seemed stretched unnaturally across his face. It reached his eyes, which were wide and oddly vacant despite the intensity of the smile. "Welcome," he chirped, his voice overly enthusiastic, almost manic. "Find everything okay out there?" Yeah, just need some coffee," I mumbled, feeling immediately put off by his demeanor. The smile never wavered. It was like it was glued on. "Coffee, excellent choice," he exclaimed, gesturing towards the self-serve coffee station. "Fresh pot brewed just for you." I walked over to the coffee machines, feeling his eyes on my back. The smile was reflected in the polished chrome of the brewers. It was unnerving. I poured myself the largest size available, adding cream and sugar, all the while acutely aware of the attendant standing ramrod straight behind the counter, still beaming that enormous fixed smile in my direction. He didn't look away, not even for a second. I took my coffee to the counter. He rang it up, his movements quick and jerky, but the smile remained absolutely frozen. "That'll be $2.50, he said, his voice still relentlessly cheerful. I handed him the cash. As he made change, his fingers brushed mine. His skin was ice cold, like he'd been holding frozen goods, but it was a dry, papery cold that felt deeply wrong. I instinctively pulled my hand back. His smile widened, if that was even possible. "Driving far tonight?" he asked, the question sounding less like small talk and more like an interrogation despite the cheerful tone. "Yeah, back to school," I replied curtly, wanting the interaction to be over. "Ah, school, wonderful," he practically sang. "Lots of lonely roads between here and there, though. Gotta be careful. Lots of strange things happen out there in the dark." He leaned forward slightly, the smile somehow becoming more intense, more predatory. His eyes, though wide, seemed unfocused, looking somewhere past me. "Right," I said, grabbing my coffee and change. "Thanks." I started to turn away. "Wait," he called out, his voice sharp, losing some of its forced cheer. I stopped, turning back hesitantly. The smile was still there, but it looked strained now, like it took immense effort to keep it in place. "You forgot your receipt," he said, holding out the small slip of paper. His hand was trembling slightly. "Oh, I don't need it, thanks," I said, already backing towards the door. "No, you need it," he insisted, his voice dropping lower, the cheerfulness completely gone, replaced by a desperate urgency. The smile looked grotesque now, a rictus of forced pleasantry barely masking something else. "Take it. Please look at it later when you're safe." His eyes flickered towards the door, then back at me. There was genuine fear in them now, warring with the horrifying smile. Something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just a weird attendant, this guy was terrified, and he was trying to tell me something without saying it. Confused and increasingly scared, I quickly walked back, snatched the receipt from his trembling hand, his skin was still unnaturally cold, and practically bolted out of the store. I didn't look back. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and sped out of the brightly lit lot, merging back onto the dark interstate as fast as I could. My heart was hammering. What the hell was that? The smile, the cold skin, the weird intensity, the sudden shift in tone, the desperate insistence on the receipt. It was deeply unsettling. I drove for about 20 minutes, adrenaline overriding my fatigue, constantly checking my rear-view mirror, half expecting to see headlights following me. Nothing. Finally, feeling a little distance had made me safer, I remembered the receipt. My curiosity outweighed my fear. I turned on the dome light and unfolded the crumpled piece of paper while keeping one eye on the road. It was a standard gas station receipt, showing the date, time, location, and the $2.50 charge for the coffee. But scrawled hastily on the back in shaky handwriting were 4 words. "He makes me smile." Underneath that, almost illegible, "Don't stop again. Watch mirrors." A wave of nausea washed over me. "He makes me smile." Who? What was going on back there? Was the attendant being forced to act that way? Was someone else in the store, someone I hadn't seen? Was he a hostage, or was it something stranger? The unnatural brightness of the station, the attendant's cold skin, the fixed smile, the cryptic warning. It felt like something out of a nightmare. I immediately checked my mirrors again, my blood running cold. Far behind me, maybe a mile or 2 back, I saw a single pair of headlights. Had they been there before? Were they gaining on me? Paranoia kicked into high gear. I pressed down on the accelerator, pushing my little car faster through the Nebraska night. For the next hour, I watched those headlights in my mirror. They kept pace, never getting closer, never falling further behind. They just stayed there, a constant, silent presence in the darkness behind me. Were they connected to the gas station? Was it him? Or just another late-night driver? I couldn't know, and the uncertainty was terrifying. Eventually, I saw the lights of a major, brightly lit truck stop ahead, bustling with trucks and cars even at that hour. I signaled, took the exit, and pulled into the crowded parking lot, finding a spot right near the entrance, under a bright light surrounded by other vehicles. I cut the engine, my hands shaking. I looked back towards the highway. The headlights that had been following me continued on, disappearing into the distance. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe. I didn't get any more coffee. I locked my doors, reclined my seat, and just sat there wide awake until the sun came up. The bustling activity of the truck stop a comforting shield against the memory of the smiling attendant and his desperate, cryptic warning. I never drove that stretch of I-80 at night again if I could help it. And every time I see a gas station attendant with too wide a smile, a part of me chills, remembering the terror in those eyes and the message scrawled on the back of a receipt. He makes me smile. Who was he? And what happened if the smile finally dropped? I don't think I want to know. My grandpa used to tell this story, swore up and down it was true. He was a traveling salesman back in the 60s and 70s, covering vast territories across the southwest Arizona, New Mexico, West Texas. Lots of driving, lots of lonely highways, lots of late nights. He said this happened sometime in the early 70s, on a trip through a particularly desolate part of New Mexico. He'd been driving all day, pushing to make it to Albuquerque by morning. It was well after midnight, the desert landscape lit only by a sliver of moon and the stars, which seemed incredibly bright out there, far from any city lights. His car, an old Ford Galaxy, was running low on gas. Back then, 24-hour stations weren't as common, especially in remote areas. He was starting to get worried when he saw a faint glow ahead. It turned out to be a single ancient-looking gas pump standing by itself on the side of the two-lane highway. There wasn't even really a station building, just the lone pump under a single bare bulb dangling from a weathered wooden post. And behind it, a small dark shack that might have been a shed or maybe where an attendant stayed. It looked dubious, but it was his only option. He pulled over, the tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. The place felt utterly deserted. The only sound was the ticking of his car's engine cooling and the wind whispering through the sparse desert scrub. The pump itself looked like something out of a museum, tall, rounded top with a clock face style dial instead of digital numbers. He got out, stretched, and looked around. No sign of life. He walked over to the shack and knocked. Nothing. He knocked again, louder. "Hello? Anybody here?" Still silence. He peered through the grimy window, but it was pitch black inside. Maybe the attendant was asleep, or maybe the place was abandoned. But the light above the pump was on. He went back to the pump, examining it. It didn't look like it had a card reader, definitely too old for that. He figured it must be cash, but how to pay if no one was around? He was about to give up and risk running out of gas when he heard it. A faint whispering sound. He froze, listening intently. It seemed to be coming from the pump itself. He leaned closer, putting his ear near the metal casing. The whispering was clearer now, though still indistinct, like multiple voices murmuring just below the threshold of understanding. It wasn't mechanical noise. It sounded like actual human whispers, hushed and rapid. He straightened up, unnerved. Was he hearing things? Fatigue playing tricks on him. The wind? But the wind was blowing from the other direction, and the sound was definitely localized to the pump. He cautiously reached out and touched the cool metal handle of the nozzle. The moment his fingers made contact, the whispering intensified, becoming clearer, though still strange and layered. He could almost make out words, fragments of sentences, but they overlapped and faded in and out, spoken in different tones, different cadences. Some sounded like men, some women, some children. It was deeply unsettling. It felt like listening in on a crowd of ghosts. He snatched his hand back as if burned. The whispering immediately subsided, fading back to the barely audible murmur he'd first heard. His heart was pounding. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. He should have gotten back in his car and driven away right then. He knew it. But he was low on gas, miles from anywhere. And a strange, morbid curiosity mixed with desperation kept him rooted there. He looked at the pump again. There was a small, rusty lever on the side, the kind you had to flip to reset the dial and start the flow of gas back in the day. He hesitated, then, taking a deep breath, he reached out and flipped the lever. The old clock face dial creaked and reset to 0, and the whispering erupted. It was loud now, clear, swirling around him, seeming to come directly from the pump, from the air, from everywhere at once. Dozens, maybe hundreds of voices, all whispering frantically, urgently. He could understand them now, and what they were saying chilled him to the bone. Multiple characters, don't take it. It's not for you. Leave it, he'll know. Go away. It costs too much. Not gas. Something else. Run, he's coming. The voices were desperate, pleading, warning. They overlapped, creating a cacophony of terror. Grandpa said it felt like the accumulated fear of countless people trapped, warning him away. He stumbled back from the pump, horrified. The single bulb overhead flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. The wind seemed to pick up, swirling dust around his feet. He looked towards the dark shack. Was someone inside listening? Was this some kind of elaborate, terrifying prank? Or was this place haunted, cursed? He didn't take the gas. The warnings were too specific, too terrifying. It cost too much, not gas. Something else. He's coming. Whatever fuel this pump offered, he wanted no part of it. He scrambled back into his galaxy, started the engine with trembling hands and slammed the car into gear. He didn't dare look back at the whispering pump as he sped away, leaving the lone light and the murmuring voices behind in the vast desert darkness. He drove like a madman, praying the fumes in his tank would hold out. About 20 miles down the road, his car sputtered and died. He'd run out of gas completely. He spent the rest of the night locked in his car on the side of the highway, jumping at every sound, imagining whispers on the wind, convinced something was following him from that cursed pump. Just after dawn, a state trooper found him and helped him get gas from a can. Grandpa asked the trooper about the old pump back down the road. The trooper gave him a strange look. He said there was no gas station, not even an old pump on that stretch of highway. Hadn't been for decades, not since the new interstate bypassed it years ago. He said the locals sometimes talked about a ghost pump appearing to travelers low on fuel late at night, but everyone knew it wasn't real, just a legend, a desert mirage born of fatigue and desperation. But Grandpa swore it was real. He swore he heard the voices. He felt the cold metal, flipped the lever. He heard their warnings. He believed that pump wasn't dispensing gasoline, but something else entirely, drawing travelers in, offering a bargain with a terrible price. He said the trooper's dismissal just made it creepier. If the pump wasn't supposed to be there, what was it? And who were the voices trying to warn him about? Who was he? Grandpa never drove that stretch of road again, always taking the longer interstate route, no matter the extra time. And until the day he died, he maintained that the whispers were real, a chorus of trapped souls tied to that phantom pump in the New Mexico desert, forever warning travelers. Multiple characters, don't take it, it costs too much. And there you have it. 5 chilling encounters at the edge of the map, where the hum of the pumps meets the silence of the night. Places meant for quick stops that turned into lingering nightmares. What do you think? Which part of these stories did you find the most terrifying? Let me know down in the comments. If these tales sent a shiver down your spine, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone else who enjoys the darker side of the road, and make sure you subscribe to Whispering Reapers for more disturbing stories. Stay safe out there and maybe fill up during daylight hours. Until next time.